folks, it's B-Maze here from RC Groups, and today we're going to be talking about the Armattan F1 series, specifically this F1-5 with the integrated flight control board. We're not going to be spending a great deal of time on the actual build process of this, but we are definitely going to hit the high notes that I think people would have questions on as they go throughout building their DIY kit. The very first thing that you're probably going to want to do when assembling the frame is take these little sink nuts, there's 12 of them, and just place this bottom plate onto a nice solid flat surface, and a couple of good whacks with a hammer will knock these sink nuts right down into that carbon fiber. Then just a matter of taking the arms and sandwiching the bottom plate here with the integrated power distribution board flight control combo there. You want to note that the arms are in fact different from each other. You've got these two arms which need to be together because they have the cutouts here for our rear LED. Same with the front. These two need to be together because they have the cutouts for our camera mount. So you want to note you have the correct arm in the correct position. Now before you get too far along with your frame assembly in your kit, the very first thing that you're going to want to do is decide which headers you want to use, be it the straight headers or the angled headers. You're going to want to decide which headers you want to install, and you're going to want to install those onto your integrated flight control board for assembling the frame. Because once you've assembled the frame, you're going to have a bottom plate here that's going to cover up all of these connections and you're not going to be able to get to them. What you see before you is basically what you get in the F1-5 DIY kit. So as with all Armattan DIY kits, you're going to get everything that you need to complete your build right down to quality solder. All of the F1 series are going to ship standard with these 2204 2300 kV house motors unless you upgrade to say a T motor. These, however, are excellent house motors. I'm not sure if you can see, let me find it here. I'm not sure if you can see the blue goop on the magnets there, but these motors are actually motion balanced, and basically these are balanced just the same way you would balance a car tire. These are spun up to a certain RPM, and the blue goop is there to balance out the outside parameter of the motor, so that while this is spinning, it's perfectly smooth. All of the models now are shipping with a very small gasket, okay? And that gasket is going to go right here between the integrated flight control board and the carbon fiber arm. That's simply there to prevent any hard shorts in the carbon fiber arms. The carbon fiber is in fact conductive. With the integrated flight control board, we want something there to insulate the flight controller from the arms. So you will receive a very thin, very small gasket that's going to install between the arms and the flight control board. Now with the 2204 house motors in each motor pack, you're going to get 4 longer screws and 4 shorter screws. So let me just kind of pull 2 of them out here, one long one and one short one. For the frame here with no 3-dimensional cutouts, this is flat on the top and the bottom. Okay, you're going to be using the longer of the 2 screws. So we're going to go ahead and install all 4 of these motors. You want to install the motors so that your wires are facing inward towards the ESC connections. Okay, with all 4 motors installed, the next thing that we're going to do is actually install the ESCs. These again are the 20 amp little b ESCs. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the shrink wrap that's on these ESCs and remove it. Chris provides a few new pieces of shrink wrap in the DIY kit, and the reason for that is we're going to go ahead and solder the motor leads directly to these ESCs. So just be careful, use a really sharp knife and remove the heat shrink tubing that covers these ESCs. Okay, and then we're going to remove these 3 motor wires. Now you're going to want to use pretty high heat. If you have an adjustable soldering iron, you want to be upwards of around 800 degrees when removing these motor wires. You're just going to want to take a little bit of solder and tin the tip of your iron This is not only going to help with the flow, but it's also going to help molten the solder that's already on the ESC. And it's hard to really, I don't know if you can see this on camera. I'm not sure what kind of an angle I can get at here, but we're just going to touch it right here to this pad. Again, with the solder already on the tip of the iron should make it heat up much faster, and your wire should pop off relatively quick. You do obviously want to be really careful, especially with these little ESCs. There is a itty bitty teeny tiny little looks like possibly a capacitor, could be a resistor, right here beside in between the pads of the ESC, so you want to be careful of those. So we're just going to go to the next one, heat it up and pop it off. Okay, so you want to do that for all 4 ESCs. So now that we have all of the motor wires removed from the ESCs, we're ready to actually go ahead and install these onto the frame. Now, you want to decide how you want to install yours. It's entirely up to you. You can cut your motor wires. I'm just going to kind of position this at a decent spot. You can trim your motor wires relatively short and go ahead and install these wires right onto the edges of the ESCs wired straight. There's no crossing of the wires or any of that. We're going to do that in BL-Heli later. But you can either install it like that, or you can actually take, and I'm just going to kind of pull these 3 wires up right in between the positive and the negative. I'm going to fold these over. It's hard to see on camera, but once I get it here, I'm going to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So I've not actually trimmed the motor wires. I've just taken them. Let's see if I can hold these down here so you can see it on camera. I just took them and pulled them in between the positive and the negative wire and folded them back over top of itself so that none of the wires actually trimmed at all. And I can then install those directly to the pads on the ESC. That way, you know, I mean, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room. If we ever need to replace the ESC, we're not left with, you know, 1/4 of an inch of wire that we need to deal with. It's entirely up to you. This is a DIY kit. You can do it how you want to do it. So I'm just showing you both ways, 2 of the common ways that folks do their ESCs. Now for this particular build in the video, I've decided to go ahead and trim the motor wires relatively short, and I'm going to be installing the ESC in between there, right like this. So it's going to make for a really pretty clean build and kind of a low profile, which is what I'm going for. But again, it's entirely up to you. So I'm going to install all 4 ESCs to this point, and I'll be right back. Okay, and after you have all 4 of the ESCs soldered up to the motors, all of the motor wires have been soldered straight. Again, we're not worried about, we're not worried about crossing any of those. We're going to do that later in the BL-Heli configuration. But you just want to take one of your pieces of heat shrink, slide that down over everything. There we go. So you slide that down over everything like that. Get this stuff out of the way here. I've got too many wires. And simply what we're going to be doing here is taking these 4 wires. We're not going to be actually connecting this to the flight controller the way we normally would. We're going to be taking these 4 wires and just snipping them right here like that. And we're going to solder those wires in place. As you can see, for the sake of time, to make this video a little bit shorter than some of the ones I have in the past, I've gone ahead and installed the ESCs, the LED light pod, and this little satellite receiver that I'm going to be using. I've also got some cool 3D printed bumpers that I've downloaded from thingiverse.com. I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of the ESC connections because this ESC number 4 right here can kind of catch you off guard. So I'm going to give you a quick look at that. I have the board oriented, so this being the rear and this being the front of the quad. This would be ESC 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the positive and the negative connections for each ESC are clearly notated on the board. There's also an M1 and a minus. This is M2 and minus, 3 minus, and then M4 and minus. The difference being M4, okay, on all three, 1, 2, and 3 ESCs, the white signal wire is right beside of the black negative wire right here. So they're all beside each other. However, on ESC4, you've got the white signal wire for M4 that's going to be right beside the positive wire. So if you just get to wiring everything up and you've kind of got a little bit of a rhythm going, you just want to make a note there for ESC4 is in fact slightly different. And I believe that was just simply because of the way the PCB board was laid out when it was drawn up. So take note of ESC4, it's slightly different than the other three. Here's a closer look at the receiver connections that I'm using and the connection for the LED light pod. Now, the satellite receiver that I'm using connects to channel 4 on the flight controller. So from the left to right, we've got channel 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And again, that's where my satellite receiver is connecting. Depending on what receiver you're running is going to depend on where you connect here. For example, if you're using a PPM receiver, you're going to be connecting all of your wires to channel number 1. In my case, however, I'm using 4. Now the LED light pod, that's always going to connect here to channel number 5. And this very top row, this is the signal. So you're going to connect your white wire to the top signal. You're going to connect the 5 volts to the middle connection, and then this very bottom row, that's the ground. So that's how you're going to connect your LED pod on this end. Now, taking a closer look at the back of the LED pod, okay, we have the VDD, okay, which is the 5 volts that's going to connect right here. Right beside that, we have a DI, that's data in. That's where our white signal wire is going to connect. Beside that, we have DO, which may or may not look like DC on your board, but that's in fact DO, which is data out. Nothing's going to be connected there. That would be if you were going to feed power from there to another board, or data rather, if you were going to feed data to another LED pod. And then right beside that is G&D. Obviously, that's ground for our black wire is going to connect there. So it's going to be 5 volts, white wire data, nothing there, and then our ground wire. That's the connections that you're going to have on the back of the pod. Looking at the front of the pod, what you've got, and I realize that this text here is actually upside down, but this is how it will be mounted in the quad. You can see we have a little bit longer standoff right here than we do at the top. This is obviously for the bottom plate, which is thicker, and this is for the top plate. It starts over here with LED 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So when we do our wiring order in CleanFlight, we want to go ahead and click our wiring order the same way that the LED is. That way, if you make any changes to, say, this side over here versus this side over here, it's actually going to be oriented the correct way. We'll do that here in just a second. Now, if you remember at the very beginning of the video, I had told you that one of the first steps was actually installing your headers. In my case, it appears that I've kind of broken my own rule, but I actually am going to be making all of my connections hardwired, and that's just to kind of keep a low profile build. So again, that's entirely up to you. Now that we have all of the physical connections made for our LED light pod, we're going to take a look in CleanFlight and see the settings that we need to make in there to make this LED work. So once you're connected to CleanFlight, to enable the LED pod, you're going to want to go to the Configuration tab, scroll down here towards the bottom, and you can see mine's already enabled, but you're going to want to click the LED strip, enable that, and hit Save and Reboot. Next, we're going to scroll down here to LED strip. Now, yours may already have some things kind of happening in here, and if it does, just hit Clear All, and then scroll down here and the wiring order and hit Clear All Wiring. So basically, you're just wiping the slate clean and you want to start over. It doesn't matter where we start in here. We could pick any one of these boxes to start with. We have 9 LEDs. So the first thing we need to do is go to wiring order mode. So we're going to click that, turn that on, and then I'm just going to start right here. So I'm going to click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I'm going to uncheck wiring order mode because now I've basically told the CleanFlight these are my 9 LEDs and these are how they're laid out. So I've started from the bottom and I've worked to the top just simply because that's how they're actually laid out on the pod. So we can make these LEDs do basically what we want them to do, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to show you the quick and simple. We can drag and highlight all 9 LEDs. You're going to hit throttle and color, and then you're going to want to come down here and just pick any color. For this example, I'm going to choose this number 5 right here, green, and then hit save. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So remember, we chose the green in CleanFlight, and you can see this here has kind of a orangish hue to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and move the throttle up, and you can see it's moving. So there's green, and now at max throttle we've kind of got a teal color going on. So we're going to pull all the way back down, and now we're back to that orange color. So that's the full throttle range right there. So now I'm going to jump over and I'm going to change to, instead of that number 5, which was green, I'm going to choose this number 11, which is purple. And I've hit save. Now you can see that I'm starting off with pretty much like a cobalt blue color. And as I scroll up the throttle range, now I've got a turquoise all the way up at the max. And then down here is the blue. So the point I wanted to go ahead and try and make with this is the color in CleanFlight doesn't really seem to correspond with our output that we actually get. However, the color does change. But you can see that the color is changing as we move the throttle up and down. And we can do the same thing with the arm state right here. So let's just uncheck throttle and color, and we're going to highlight all of the LEDs. Sorry, we're going to highlight all of the LEDs and then hit arm state and hit save. Now we're going to go back down to the quad and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here we are, disarmed. All LEDs are green. So I'm going to arm the quad. And after we arm, we turn to that cobalt blue color. So disarmed is green, armed is cobalt blue, and as we throttle up, there's no changes because we're simply doing the arm state at this moment. So now we're just going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to take the top 3. I'm not going to do all of them at one time anymore. I'm just going to take the top 3 and I'm going to change those to the arm state. Or actually, I'm going to leave those rather on arm state. So for the arm state, I've chosen this number 2, red. For the ring, I've chosen number 13, which is kind of this, I don't know, kind of a pinkish color. And then for the, actually I want to uncheck arm state for that one. For throttle, I've got number 11, which is the purple color. So as we highlight each individual one, we can make sure that what's changing over here is what we want to happen. So for this one is arm, ring, and throttle, and it's the same way for all 3. So we're going to hit save, and we're going to go back and see what that looks like. So now we're back at the quad, and you can see that the top is green when it's unarmed. We got the 2 side lights going on there under ring, and the bottom one is kind of a bluish color. Would want to change that to a different color to be stood out on camera a little bit better. But the top is arm, middle is the ring, and the bottom one is the throttle range. So I'm just going to arm it. You can see where the top changes color and now the ring is moving. As I slowly move the throttle up, you'll see that the middle lights scroll faster and the bottom row will change colors with the throttle range. So I'm just going to disarm it, and there we go. So you can see that that's just something really cool that you can kind of play around with, and you can configure it however you want it configured. So that's basically it for setting up the LEDs. You can play around in here and configure these however you'd like them. If you've watched this video all the way through to this point, I'd like to thank you. Please subscribe and stay tuned, because next we're going to be building the Armattan MRP-130. So that's going to kind of be a fun micro build. Those are really popular now with the FFA regulations. So stay tuned and have a great day.